in pre-dynastic Egypt, we forget there was kings that was ruling for 35 and 45,000 years.
Yeah.
But in under the dynastic periods, they are the longest reigning, I think, was Ramses, which was like 81 years or something like that.
Yeah.
You see, so what are we looking at? We looking at somebody's trying to control the narrative, and anything that's belligerent to the narrative given is wrote off as fanciful, mythological, and far-fetching and far-reaching for the truth. But as soon as you start comparing the information in the document to the settlement, it starts to match up so accurately that you like, we can't just toss this out. That's like throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, well, interesting. I mean, because like I'm aware like Nubia is older than Kemet, and also people like Dr. Ben Yoshi Ben Yakin. Speaking on the Egyptians spoke that they came from the beginning of the Nile, where God happily dwells in the foothills of the mountains of the moon. Place right around Uganda. Beginning of the Nile. So I'm aware of like the maybe that I mean some people see these as like they were more primitive before the development reaching, but either way, we can clearly see Africa as the oldest civilization. Now, what an interesting
No, that's
person
not true. Africa does not have the oldest civilizations.
where so you saying that the Americas, was you saying?
The Americas has the oldest pyramids, the oldest Temple of Isis, which was the first seat of sacerdotal power, right?
Yeah,
It's the oldest. It's older than everything in Egypt. And it's the only thing that can reach back close to it is in Rafali, South Africa, in Manadapa, which they called in the Sumerian writings, they called it the Absu,
very old South Africa. Yeah, yeah,
right? So that's the only, and it's also mentioned in a lot of the writings that talk about Atlantis, which is one of the foundational civilizations that all modern civilizations is built on. We don't realize that humans in the physical form is not the same when they're not in physical form. So we limit ourselves based on the limitations that the reigning or ruling society give us at the time. To
yeah,
break through the
yeah.
limits is to see that we infinite beings, we always been in existence, therefore existence always been here.
Right.
Once you
Yeah,
realize
yeah,
you're an eternal being, it takes the brakes off. If I'm an eternal being, what am I missing? Is the first question you need to ask yourself. How do a eternal being come into a finite world, right, and live a life and then go back to infinity, right? So you truth and falsehood. The falsehood is that the body is the true self. The body is not the true self. The body is the vehicle that the true self drive around in order to communicate to the rest of the people driving around in their earth rovers, meat suits, meat
yeah.
modems.
So basically, in the spiritual, we'll call it, you know, we're seeing things in the three-dimensional space, the five sense reality. So some of these pyramids that you're talking about in the Americas, now, are we speaking on these were built when we were in our spiritual form rather than our physical form?
No, they was built in the physical form or they wouldn't be in the physical reality.
Okay, now, when you say the Americas is older than Egypt or Sudan, you got pyramids in Sudan. So where do you find that? Like, I mean, which researchers do you find speaking on this? Only because most people usually agree that the pyramids in Sudan are older, well, predate Egypt by several hundred years. And the Americas, when you say the Americas, do you mean Mexico?
That's part of the Americas.
Yeah,
Also in
yeah, yeah,
Arizona,
yeah.
in Arizona is the original Temple of Isis. The
Okay.
replica The replica was set up in Kemet, and then Rome set another replica up, and they called it Vatican City. Those are replicas,
Yeah,
right? It's also another replica called the Parthenon of Isis in France, but we call it Paris.
yeah.
But when you trace it back, the original is in the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
And it's also the oldest, one of the oldest structures on Earth, let alone temple buildings.
So you know the
But see,
people,
the Grand Canyon, the
yeah,
Smithsonian is in a full-fledged effort to silence anything about the Grand Canyon in their artifacts that many of what we believe came from Egypt actually came from the Grand Canyon in Arizona in the Americas, but they gave it to us as an Egyptian exhibit in their museums. But they know they didn't come from over in Kemet. They know that they came from the Arizona caves.
and then they've sailed, navigated to Egypt.
Right. So if they can control what you think, they don't have to worry about what you do. Miseducation of the Negro 101. You control the way a man think, you need not worry about his actions.
Yeah,
But when he started being an independent thinker, you can't control him no more. He's uncontrollable. Now you got to silence him before he started infecting these other people with something called free thinking and the ability to exercise something called free will. He's going to upset the entire paradigm that we laying down. So we're going to get rid of him and we're going to create a whole government effort called COINTELPRO. And you think that it's only functioning in America because that's the CIA version. But what's the MI5, MI6 version?
yeah,
What's the Mossad version? What's the KGB version of it? All of them had the same effort to silence anybody who was speaking against the system.
yeah,
Now you got people inside tearing it down from the inside, speaking against the system in the high seats of office of the systemic governments. That's actually corporations masquerading as governments. So somebody gonna have to go in there and tear them down. So you have to assess the psychology of the people or the sociology, and then you send the person in that the people most likely to accept tearing it down. Because if they look like us and they tear it down, it's going to be a problem. But if they don't look like us and they tear it down, good riddance.
yeah,
Let it go. Because
yeah,
we've been taught that.
yeah. That's me being fed,
But
isn't it?
everybody that don't look like us ain't against us. And everybody that look like us ain't for us.
Yeah,
That's the hardest pill to swallow.
definitely. Definitely
Because
it
when I
is.
found out that the so-called white man wasn't white and it was darker than me, my feelings was hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So let me deal with some the energy and spirit. You know, I've spoke to a couple of different people about this energy and spirit. You know, like I try to speak the language of the person who I'm speaking to. For example, say if I speak to a scientist, you know, I might use the word energy more. You know, if I was speaking to someone religious or spiritual, I'd use the word spirit maybe more so. Do you see it as like it goes hand to hand, energy and spirit?
It's it's just a different denominational description.
Okay, yeah. So, like I said, it depends on who you are talking to, and you're trying to get them to understand what you're speaking about. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Yeah, interesting. Anyway, yeah, like we were saying about Babylon, interesting because you know there's many different places of civilization, mystic systems from different places and that. But now when we deal with Babylon, what's the story of Babylon from the beginning in order for them to get this power, gain this power, and basically change the world as we knew it?
Look, if you go back into the dynasties of ancient Egypt, you find that there was a priesthood war. It
Yeah,
was called the Amun priest versus the Aten priests. The Amun priests wanted the concept of the inner deity of the individual concealed. And they wanted all of those who represented divinity among the ranks of humans to conceal themselves. So they wrote in Egypt what's known as the Amun spell or the Amen spell. That's why you say Amen after the prayer, because you're telling yourself that you don't want your God self to be seen. The opposing faction was called the Aten priests. Let your light shine into the world, Christ consciousness. Elevate your mind to free your soul and teach the others to do the same.
Okay, interesting. Right, okay.
Okay. Now, the warring priests use sorcery. These priests were women in the harem of the pharaoh, the male pharaoh. The only woman that had sway was the senior wife, who was given the jurisdictional authority by number 13, known as the Queen Mother, the mother of the king. It don't matter how many wives the Pharaoh took on, the only one that can tell him that he is not allowed to go to war, or he is the one that the Queen Mother give the heart key to. It's the only way I can explain it, make it simple.
Yeah.
She gives the heart key to the one she chose to be his wife in her stead as his mother, because his new wife is also going to be his mother, his confidant, his lover, and everything else. So her love for him have to be unconditional, just like his mother's love was unconditional when she brought him into the world. In modern times, mother's love becomes conditional if the child follows what mama said when he was young, when he get old. The problem is that the conditions that's placed on the love put restrictions on the self-expression and the ability to use free will. It's called browbeat. Browbeat you into walking a straight line so that you can follow the system. Byproducts of the Amen spell. Now, saying that, we take you back to the book of Leviticus, where they tell you about a place called of the Chaldees. This was Babylon. Was one of the major cities of Babylon. The dwellers in the city of were called Chaldeans. Abraham was a Chaldean in the Bible, meaning he came from the city of major city in the land of Babylon. But he didn't get his birthright from When he crossed over the Tigris and Euphrates, and they said he's Ibri, meaning Hebrew, he crossed over. He crossed over the rivers, takes you back to what we call the temple rite. The temple rite is called the March Across the Burning Sands. Any Masonic brother listening know exactly what I'm talking about. The purpose of the march across the desert sands is to expose the righteous son to the heat of the sun to see if he thrive or if he succumb. Only once you've crossed the two rivers, right, do you become Hebrew, Ibri, right? Now you are qualified to be adopted in the priesthood after the order of Melchizedek. In Egypt, they weren't called the Tiger and Euphrates. It was called the Blue Nile and the White Nile, right? Now, it was still the same ritual, mirrored rituals. During this time that they come out as Abraham, they go back in something that's known as the captivity of the Jews. Anybody can look it up. It's not hard to find.
Okay.
They were allegedly in captivity in the land of Babylon for 400 years. This is the story. I didn't write it, I'm just reading it.
Yep.
Now, when they came out, there was no Torah anymore. The Torah was originally the rules and regulations that Abraham followed. So when you read in the Bible that Abraham was given the law, the Hebrew word is Torah. So Abraham, children go into captivity in Babylon. They come out with 2 new books. These 2 new books is based on what's known as sin rights, R-I-T-E-S. Sin rights make all practitioners of these rights a sinner. Starting to get familiar with the church now, ain't you?
Yeah.
Okay, now, what are the sin rights? They were written by a Babylonian god known as Ninursin. They commonly just call him Sin, right? And Ninursin wrote a war protocol to conquer Earth using 3 forms of high magic: Babylonian blood magic, Babylonian money magic, and Babylonian sex magic. When he and his brother, one of his brothers who was masquerading as Marduk, who called himself Marduk, the play on the name confuses the historian as to it being the same person when it's 2 different people. They do this on purpose because if you don't know the character of the individual you're defending, you will be defending the wrong character. So they got together under the direction of the commander of the fleet. We call him Enlil. In Sumer, he's known as Enlil. That's a title, not a name. But in Hebrew, they call him Yahweh. Right? And in Europe, they call him Zeus.
Yeah.
Same character, different languages, and the title that means the same is pronounced different in different languages.
Yeah.
You don't say president in Japanese. It's a different word for the same office and function.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, in order to rule Earth, there is something called the Earth Scroll that has the 10 keys to wisdom to rule the Earth. This was captured in the Roman conquest of the Himalayas when they went into the Indus Valley under the direction of Emperor Constantine. Right? With understanding how to control 10 key aspects of the life of the crowd, you can control them now. So after his conquest and capture of the scroll of governance, which is how to govern Earth, they said that he conquered the world. He had not entered Africa. Africa was known. He went into the Indus Valley. He did not conquer the Khans or the Huns at that time because he couldn't defeat them. So he went to the path of least resistance. He go to the source of the right to rule scrolls of the earth. This is why they built Rome. Right? Now remember, Constantine was a Greek. No, Alexander, my bad. Alexander was the Greek.
Yeah, some
But
say
he
Macedonian, but some, yeah.
Yeah, so he conquered on behalf of his father, Zeus, because they call him the son of Zeus. This is important because when we get another 1,500 years away, Jesus is going to be turned from Isis into the Son of God.
Yeah, yeah.
And Peter, which means father in English, is not the name, but the title of the seat held by the Pope. Right? So when Alexander the Great, which I call him Alexander the Fake, because he wasn't the rightful ruler of Greece. He took power from the rightful ruler. Most of us don't know that because we don't know how interlopers interlope. And as the son of Zeus, the son of Enlil, he is exercising the jurisdiction of the so-called God of Earth. Right? So now they use these tools. When Constantine comes to power, he sees what they call cults. Anything that's not Christian, Judaism, or Islam is classified as pagan cults. It don't mean anything wrong with them, but the energy put behind the expression in the English language